What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another tutorial using Infinite Painter. Now, don't be put off if you heard that and you're put off because you use a different app where you can actually go ahead and participate as well. There is two options for the palette. If you are an Infinite Painter user, you can download the palette file and it will be an Infinite Painter palette and it will go straight into your palettes. But if you're using a different app, potentially like High Paint, you can download the palette as an image so you can still follow along. All the colors will be in the same order as well. And if you'd like to get early access to these tutorials as well as a loyalty badge beside your name that grows over time, you can become a member of the channel and support me and all the work that I do here on the channel. So check that out using the link in the description down below. Enjoy today's tutorial and let's get started. So we're going for a screen size canvas size today, which is 2388 by 1668 as well. So we get this lovely landscape orientation. And once you're ready, hit create. That'll create your canvas for you. And then we're going to go ahead and do a couple of things. We want to first of all go up to our tools. We're going to go to perspective here and we're going to scroll across until we hit grid. And then we're going to drag this node here. Now, if you don't see the node, just turn on and off the magnet until you do. You can drag it into the bottom right. That gives you a 4x4 grid on your screen, just like mine, so you can try and lay things out accordingly so you know where to position things on your canvas. It tends to make life a lot easier for everybody. And if you then tap on the magnet to turn it off, you're now good to go. And then we're going to go ahead and start adding in all of our content. Now, of course, we're going to need the palette for today. So if we go to our color here, if I tap on basic palette, I've got the Beach Cliff canvas palette here. Now this one, you have two options in the description down below. If you're using a different app, you're going to want to do something like three dots, go to import and import it as a photo, and then make sure that in your settings somewhere, if you go to settings and you go to the option of long press, that it's set to eyedropper. That way you'll be able to long press and hold down to select a color from the actual image. If you're using Infinite Painter though, of course, you can grab the palette actual file, import it in. I'll leave a link to a video in the description down below on how you can import it in. It only takes a couple of seconds. So the brush of choice today, if we go to our brushes, we're going to use paint and the clay roller for this one, pretty much everything in here. We're going to start off by setting the size fairly large. We want to make it nice and big. We're going to fill in our whole screen and we're going to go to our color. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this tone here. Let's go bottom right. So it's this one here in the canvas. You'll be able to see that selected. And then we're just going to simply go ahead and fill in our screen. Now you can leave little bits of sort of mess here and there. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to worry too much about it. Any sort of streaks or anything like that will look really cool later on. We're then going to go to our colors and grab then this color here, the color just beside it. It's ever so slightly lighter. And then roughly in the middle of this row here of the grid, we're just going to go left to right and then start to kind of streak that in. And I might even make it a bit smaller. So I was at about 400. I'm now going to go down to about 200, just so I can streak this through, create some purposeful streaks in our painting of our sky. And then we're just making sure that in this area it fades up into the previous color. On screen it's probably looking very, very white, but it's actually blue. So you'll be able to see that on your screen. Now I've just adjusted the camera so it's bringing through a little bit of the blue. Now on this layer, we're then going to go ahead and go to our colors again. We're going to grab the light tone just beside it again, this color here. And then we're going to go to our brush. We're going to make it a lot smaller though, probably around about kind of the 60 mark. And up towards the top here, we're going to want to try and add in some clouds. And all they want to be is little sort of wiggles and squiggles in the sky. We're only focusing somewhat in this top row area here, so you can use pressure if you've got it available. Wiggle your pen, create streaks. Clouds should somewhat get larger if they're a little bit above you, so therefore if they're right towards the top of the canvas, you can wiggle your pen quite a lot. I'm using varying pressures and different levels of squiggle and pressure to build up this kind of streaky look to the sky. Maybe leave the right hand side a little bit less sort of covered in sort of content. And make sure you've got something fairly substantial up here, especially right at the very top of your canvas. And that's as simple as it needs to be. You can always bring your brush size down to say a 30 and maybe create the odd purposeful sort of wiggle a little bit lower down. But some of these may get lost later on, so you don't need to sort of stress over them too much. Then go to your colors again, color next to it, slightly dark tone. This is going to act as the shadow tone to the clouds. So set that back to around about sort of 55. And then we're just going to take a look at the shapes we've created and somewhat towards the underside, kind of just wiggle your pen through the cloud And look how quick and easy it is. It's going to be scribble season in this particular tutorial. We're just going to tap away, patch away, paint away. That's the most important thing. We're painting today. We are just trying to patch things in. I'm patching in a few random areas of dark tone in here. So if I zoom in for you, this is roughly what it's going to look like. And that's your cloud scene. We don't really need to do anything more than that. You can go back to the previous colors if you want, say this second to last color in the palette. And if you want to, you could just fade over the top of some of those clouds, taking them down a little bit more, kind of fading them and blending them into the sky, thinning them out a little bit here and there. It's totally up to you if you want to introduce some blue into the body of your clouds. It's not a big deal and not something really to stress over for today's design anyway. Next up, we're going to draw in some areas of land. So we're just going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here. So it's the third color on the middle row. And same brush still, so clay roller, probably set it to about 100 so we can get some good sort of blocked in shapes here. And we're going to come across round about here. Look at where I am in my guide. I'm just going to come across. I want the land to, I'm going to bring it a bit smaller, 50. And then it's going to swoop down to around about, say, here on the cliff edge there. And then we're going to come along and then start to make our way down the beach here. You can make that a bit more dramatic if you want to. Patch it in and then literally paint it in. Squiggle your pen in there. Block that in. Block that area of land in. So we're going along the beach down towards the edge of the cliff down there. We can maybe round that off a tiny bit more on the top as well. Don't worry if there's any gaps in there for now. It will look pretty cool later on. Bring the brush size down just a smidge just to try and tidy that up. And also just the only thing I want to make sure is blocked in is just that little cliff edge. Now I'm going to create another new layer and drag it underneath that layer. I'm then going to go to my colors and I'm going to grab this blue here just beside it. It's the fourth color in the middle row there. We're going to go ahead and introduce some land that's a little bit further back in the design. It's going to be back here. We're going to come along and it's going to kind of run in behind. So you want to make sure it's a little bit higher in your design than the land you just created. That way we get an avenue for the water to kind of wrap the sea round onto that opposite side. Now while we're here, the only thing we need to do is go to our colors and go back to the previous color, the third color in that middle row. Set your brush size to something really small, around about 28 pixels there, if not slightly smaller maybe, about sort of 20. And all I want you to do is just kind of create avenues of land on here, different varying pressures if you've got it. If you don't have pressure sensitivity, you can always go ahead and tap on here, bring your opacity down, and then that way you can build up color streak after streak. We're just wiggling our pen along here, right up against the top edge as well, to create the illusion of detail in the distance. Look at when we zoom all the way out, it gets crushed and you cannot see the actual details there because later on it's also going to get blurred as well. Let's then continue blocking in other shapes as well. So we'll create another new layer. We will go ahead and we'll keep it underneath all of the layers we've worked on so far, excluding the background. So it's the third layer down now. We'll go to our colors and we're going to grab some of the sandy tones. So I want you to grab this color here. It is the, what color is that? Sixth across the middle row there. And we're going to go right to the end of our land over there. So you may want to bring your brush size to around about say 50 to 60 and go along there just to get that first part in. And then you can just make your brush size a lot bigger, maybe 130, and just block in the beach. It's going to come all the way down and get a little bit wider as it makes its way down towards us. Lovely. You can always vary up the shape a tiny bit as well if you want to by just adding in the tiny sort of drift out into the water. But make sure it's blocked in underneath that area of land as well. Lovely. And maybe even just chop that down a tiny bit. Down here actually gets lost shortly anyway. And there we've got some basic shapes of our landscape. Let's go ahead and introduce some more sand colors while we're here. So let's go to the next color along. So it's the fourth color from the right in the middle row. With the brush size set to around about sort of 40, we're just going to sort of lightly towards the middle, just kind of scribble in a very horizontal kind of fashion, just scribbling through. Now, don't forget, everything's going to get blurred out, so you don't need to stress over it again too much. I know I keep saying that, but it's very true. And then these are all going to be kind of the grooves in the actual sand here, sorry. So we're going all the way along. Next time I'm not going all the way up to the edge over here on the right, because the sand would get a little bit darker because of the water drifting on top of it. Then I'm going to go to my colors again. I'm going to move across another color. So we're third color from the right now. And I'm just going to, in here again, probably even slightly larger, about 72, just kind of patch in random areas of light tone in the beach. Don't do the whole thing, keep it random. I've kind of got a patch here and I've got a patch there as well. I'm going to grab my brush, I'm just going to make it a tiny bit smaller, about 30, and maybe just introduce some sort of lighter paint plane back there as well, just ever so slightly. Then what you can do is you can go to your colors again and go back to the first color, which is this one here. It's the 5th color from the right now in that middle row. And you can just run your pen sort of very, very lightly and kind of create patches and random areas and break down some of those highlight tones and now go back through. So going back in then with your base color can then introduce the shadow tones again and sort of bring them back to life, should I say. Now we're going to leave that for a minute. I know it doesn't look like much, but once we've got the blurring and stuff in, it's all going to come to life a bit more. So now on this layer here, this big piece of land on the left, we're going to go ahead and introduce some sand dunes. So they very lightly, same color we was just working with, and about here, I'm going to just wiggle my pen, creating a bit of an avenue for the sand to make its way down and onto the beach, but also up and onto the hillside as well. Down here at the very bottom, I'm going to set the brush size a bit bigger, about 60 now, and again just overlapping kind of the base here, and then you can introduce like another avenue maybe of a sort of where it opens up. Here in the middle, I could probably bring my brush size down even further again, about sort of 20 to 24, and again another kind of breakout where you can make your way up and onto the top of the hillside. You can maybe even expand on this one if you want to. You make it much larger. You can have fun creating some sand dunes, and you can even introduce sort of random patches of sand in the gaps as well. They don't have to necessarily be right at the top, you know, something like this, and they don't have to necessarily attach at the bottom. We're keeping it really simple. Now we've got loads more colors to chuck into this area here. We've got different tones that we need to introduce. So let's move to this tone here. It's the 2nd color in the middle row here. Quite a light tone, so I want you to try and keep this a bit closer towards us. So let's go up to around about 56, and we're just going to squiggle away and create avenues for green grass areas. So coming along here, you can go right up to the very edge if you want, and vary your brush size, about 56 to 60 to 70 even. You can really add in as much as you like. You can even go down here now and start to maybe get really close to some of the sand and kind of create patches of grass that get fairly close. Now in the distance, I want the color to start to fade off, so we're going to start making it a little bit lighter. Again, if you don't have pressure sensitivity, you're going to have to lower the opacity as things get further away. Let's go to our colors though. Let's move into the next color beside it. So that is the 1st color in that middle row, and we've got slightly darker tone now, so we can literally just squiggle this in the gaps. You can tap away in it. You can introduce shadow tone up and in your grassy areas, up and in your land, bushes, etc., in the actual reeds of the grass. 32% now with the brush size. I'm going to come down a tiny bit, right down towards the sand down here. If things are a little bit closer, like here, you can afford to be a bit more granular with your brush, meaning you can afford to make it a bit smaller because you've got areas that are a bit closer that might require just the odd additional bit of detail. And then in the distance, you can start to make things kind of fade out. You can wiggle your pen along that back area there, and then go to your colors. The next color in the top right of the palette up here is this gray tone. That's going to be the kind of fall off now of all the detail in the distance. So let's set the brush size a bit bigger again. Let's go up to about 70 and just go along the rear part there, over the top of some of our colors that we were just working with, and just really mute the colors down now as things get further away. You can just emphasize the edge of the cliff there as well. You know, go along there, create some interesting avenues of detail, but just mainly on the top edge all the way down towards the water, like so. And you can see how the detail starts to come back in right close to us. You can always go back in with any of the previous tones and like break down, you know, here in the distance where I've got some of those dark tones, maybe I want to wiggle some small light green dashes in here. You don't need to overcomplicate it, but you can do. You can even put little dashes and little areas there to really break down the grass. And you can get really up close to some of those sandy areas as well. Don't be afraid as well to go back in with the sand. So it's the color here. It's the 5th color from the right hand side. You know, all this is optional at this point. It's totally dependent on what you've done with your work. But you can always go back through. You can emphasize some of these sand dunes. You can even link them together. At the base down here, you can overlap some, you know, color again, just to really kind of blend the two environments together. How the grass makes its way down towards the sea and the sand. And then in the sand, we're going to go back to the sandy layer. So it's the third layer down. Go to your colors again. We're going to want to try and introduce a slightly darker tone in here. So let's jump to this color here. It's the fourth color from the right hand side. And I'm just going to, with the brush size probably set to around about 47%, just really lightly, just kind of scrape my way through here, going along some of the edge there of the land and the sand. And then as it gets further away, that's fine. You can also make it a little bit darker towards the water's edge if you want, to show how the sand is a bit wet. You can create darker areas. So we're just going to scrape through here, just trying to add in a little bit more detail here and there in our landscape. Let's move to the water though. So let's create another new layer. Let's go to our colors and we're going to introduce the ocean tones, which are down here. So I'm going to start off with the fourth color on the bottom row. I'm going to make my brush size a bit larger to start with, around about sort of 120. I'm going to block in this area here. This is all going to be ocean area. So we're just going to come along here right up towards the back of our design as well. And don't forget, you are now on top of the sand layer. So if you want to, you can really lightly with your pressure kind of overlap the sand a tiny, tiny bit. Just going along that edge, and that will kind of break down the two environments again, creating areas of water. Don't worry if it's kind of streaky in here or you leave any gaps. Again, it's perfectly fine. We've got more colors though. We've got a few different tones. Let's start then with this really beautiful blue tone, bottom of the third column from the right. Over here in the bottom right, we're going to go left to right towards the sort of rear area here. So the deeper water, lightly just kind of streaking this through. You can go right down towards the end, but mainly down here, you can really patch in the blue, streaking it. You can always bring the brush size down to maybe about 89 and just create little random areas towards the shoreline. Leave gaps in there that look great. And maybe even some darker patches by going over them a few times. Go to your colors and then grab this color here, the bottom of the second column, slightly lighter now again. And now you can lightly go over the top of your blue tone that you just created in the distance, especially, and just kind of layer on some different hues in there just to take away some of those blues and also introduce a bit more of a murky tone rather than these beautiful blue, royal blue kind of colors, almost turquoise, almost like tropical water tones. And then when you get close to the water's edge as well, just layer on some of that as well. Keep the opacity nice and light in terms of your pressure and just build in some light tones towards the edge. And talking about light tones, you've got one more tone to create, which is this one here. It's the bottom of the first column. Your brush wants to be set really low, somewhere to around about sort of 18. If not, that's probably a bit too small. Let's go even bigger than that. Let's go up to around about, say, 45 just to start with. We're going to go along the water's edge and just wiggle in some edge of the break of the water. So you can go along the edge. It's a very subtle tone to start with, but down here at the very front, you can just wiggle in some additional tones in here. Keep it very, very simple. Again, just towards the water's edge, you can add in these lighter tones. You can even add in, say, like a 45 here, just a couple of very small little dashes, etc., a little bit further back to show maybe the odd sort of wave. Then we do have a really bright tone to add in, which is this color here. It's the second color in the middle row from the right. Brush probably 30 to 40, if not 30. Let's go smaller than that. Let's go 28. And let's go along the water's edge there, creating our waves. I want you to try and keep it very, very simple though. But your white lines are your final lines. So they're the actual crashes onto the water. You can create layers of it by bringing the brush size down to like an 8 and just create sort of the streaks, etc., and layers of the water on the actual sand. We don't need to get too granular with it in terms of the detail, but you can just introduce sort of scrapes back here again to introduce more sort of concepts of waves. 30 now with the brush size just to create some, again, just the illusion of some waves. Again, because things are fairly close to us down here, we can see a lot more. So this area is going to be more detailed than it is in the distance. That fades off quite a lot. We're not too interested. And then back here, maybe the odd little something right at the very bottom of the frame, although that's probably going to get lost anyway. And then maybe I'll just emphasize some of that a tiny bit more. Awesome. So we've got some waves, keeping it really simple. Now at this stage, believe it or not, we're actually done with the whole rest of the landscape. We're going to focus on our foreground area. So what we need to do is we now need to introduce some blurring. So we're going to go back to this layer here. We're going to go to our create. We're going to go to edit. we're going to go to filters, and we're going to go to structure and blur. We are going to blur this out in the distance, and I believe we can leave it around about the 50% mark, which is default, and then hit the tick straight away. That pushes it way further back in our design. We're then going to move to the option here of the water as well. We're going to go again, create, edit. We're going to go to filters. We're going to go to structure and blur, except this time we're going to bring the blurring down a little bit. I reckon we can go down to around about, say, 35%. Hit the tick when you're done. Then we need to go to the sand. We're going to go again, edit, filters, structure and blur, and then bring that down again to around about 35% because they're in the same sort of focal plane. And then we're going to go to our land on the left, edit, filters, structure and blur, and we'll blur that out. And all that detail now gets lost because it gets crushed together. Now I'm going to go to 40 on this occasion because I want a little bit more blurring back here. So I'm going to hit the tick when I'm done. That's the whole background done. You do optionally have the option to blur out your clouds as well. So you could go edit, you could go to the option again of filters and structure and blur. And you can bring that down though. I would say around about sort of 30% will look good. You'll maintain a lot of the structure in the sky though. Hit the tick when you're done. Now at this point, we're going to go right to the top of our layers and create a new layer. I'm going to go to my create options. I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to grab a select option of rectangle. Take a look at my settings down here. A lot of these, if you tap them, they'll change depending on what you do to them. So take a look at any icon in case it's not working for you as you expect. All I want you to do though is go ahead and do the option here of copy merged. What that does is that pastes a brand new layer. As you can see at the top here, if I hit the tick, it's pasted a whole new layer of my design on top. If I tap on this layer now and I tap on its blend mode and change it to the option of multiply, we're going to make things a little bit darker. We're then going to go ahead and tap away. We're going to tap on this layer. We're going to add a mask to it. So the mask is attached here. It's all white because everything in white is showing part of the layer. If you then start to paint on with black, it will hide. So if we change our color now to black, notice how you can only paint in black, white or gray. If we set our disk to black and we go to our brush and we change it to the option of sprayers, we then want to go ahead and use the soft airbrush. If you're not seeing everything in black and white in terms of your color, it's because you're not selected on the layer. You want to be on the mask, not on the layer. So you want to be on the mask. So my options here for my soft airbrush are as followed, and my size fairly large, nearly 800 on the size there. We want to go ahead and fade out the top of the mask, fading it down so that just down here is a little bit darker. So we're brightening up the sky, that's fine. And then just down here, as things get a little bit closer in this kind of area here, we're going to allow it to have a little bit more definition. You can always change this later on because a mask is fully editable at a later stage. We're then going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to start introducing our foreground. So we're going to go back to our brush. We're going to go back into the option of paint and the clay roller. And we're going to take a look at our colors. Let's start off with this color here. It's the third color from the right-hand side there on the top row. The brush can be set to around about, say, 100 to 150. And we're just going to draw in some basic area of land right at the front. Look at how amazing this tends to look when you have things that are out of focus, such as the landscape that we drew in behind. And now you've got all of your content. Sorry, I just grabbed my grid by accident. You've got all of your content now at the front in the focal range. So now we've got these beautiful sharp elements against this blurry background, and everything now is in focus right in front of us. We can pick and choose now what we see as the camera and what we want to be in focus. Then wiggle your pen ever so slightly on the top edge just to rough it up. In fact, even go to your opacity, bring the opacity down to say about 27% and just introduce a little bit more color on the edge just to fade out the edge a tiny bit, because this isn't actually our main focal area either. This is ever so slightly out of focus, and we'll sort that out in a moment. Let's go back and make sure our opacity is back up to 100%. We're going to go to our colors and we're just going to blend in a boatload of colors in here. So we're going to grab the second color from the right on the top row. Brush size, let's make it around about sort of 80 in here, and we're just tapping away. We're creating the illusion that this is a dense piece of land with all the reeds of the grass in here, and there's lots going on. So when there's something like that, you can just tap away and go crazy. The more messy and the more sort of all over the place, the more believable it actually looks. To a lot of people, you start to sit there and go, right, I need to do a bit of orange and a bit of brown and then a bit of green, and then that's not how it needs to work. You just need to chuck the color on. Then go to your colors again. We're going to move into some dark tones because I want to build out that area of land. So we're going to go ahead and grab this brown here. It's the fourth color on that top row, and we'll set the brush size a bit smaller, maybe down to around about 50 this time, and we're just going to create sort of upright streaks like this, little taps and drags upwards in here. You can go right up to the edge if you want, but we're just going to fill out the entirety of here. And because we're going to have elements in focus right in front of this, some of this might not even get seen. It's also going to end up with a tiny bit of blur on it as well. So you can just add in all the little shadows in here. Simple as this. Now my colors might look slightly different. I'll try and fix it in the actual edit, so yours might actually look okay. But just follow along with the same colors. Everybody's using the same colors, so you're all good to carry on. Couple more wiggles in here because I want to introduce sort of larger, uneven, quite dense shadowed areas by just squiggling my pen, just trying to add in all the color we need. Then go to your colors again. Let's then move to some slightly more orange and some brighter tones. So we're going to grab this tone here. It's the fifth color from the right. I'm going to bring the brush size down again, though, down to around about 20 this time, and just similar process though, creating lots and lots of streaks in here. Just lots and lots of streaks, maybe a couple more in there towards the top, leaving the kind of shadows towards the base, and a couple along there. And then go to your colors. I want to grab this color here, fourth color from the right on the top row, and let's set the brush size a bit bigger, about 34, and then just towards the top edge, let's try and create a slightly more lighter tone or a lighter kind of gradient between all these tones. So a couple more in here will look good. We're going to keep going along that edge just to brighten it up. Again, I want the bottom left corner, more for a vignette kind of effect, to be a little bit darker. So we're going along that top edge, creating our big dense area of land. Now at this point, you are good. You can then go ahead and go to edit. We can go to filters, and we can go to structure and blur, and we can blur that out. Now we definitely don't want to blur it out any more than the things way further in the distance. So 30 is the absolute maximum, but you don't need to sort of go to that extreme. I think we can go to something around about, say, 22 and hit the tick when we're done, and that just acts as a bit of a backdrop now. We will create a new layer though, and we'll go to our colors and we'll grab this color here. Again, the top of the fourth column. I'm going to go to my brush once again and go to sprayers and the soft airbrush. And just down here in the bottom left, I'm just going to make sure that the bottom left has a nice dark sort of color to it, and that can even drag out a little bit more to the right, but then that gives me a nice little area of shadow here. I'm going to create one more new layer, I believe, so far for the foreground area. We're going to go to our colors, and we've got lots of light tones that we want to start introducing in here, but we are going to continue with the same color, top of the fourth column. Your brush wants to go back to the option of the paint and the clay roller, and keep the size fairly small. I reckon around about 34 is probably too big, to be fair. Let's go down to around about 16. We're creating all the little stems in here, all the little reeds. So I'm going to go down to about 11 to 16. And then all I want you to do is just have loads and loads of fun now, creating all the grassy kind of reeds that just lean over the top of that background. These are all in focus now, so what you draw now will remain nice and sharp. And then do some a little bit shorter towards the back, maybe a couple clustered together, that's fine. But then leave gaps and do the odd slightly larger one. Now do one like that. This is going to have a centerpiece because we'll draw in all the little sort of bits that hang off the edge of it. So that will be your kind of centerpiece. Once you've drawn one of those, leave it some space to live and breathe so that we've got somewhere to look at. And then maybe the odd second one again. There we go, slightly shorter. You know, you can draw in stuff around it though, that's perfectly fine, but try not to overwhelm it. You know, give it some space, maybe even block it in again like I've just done. And then the odd little flick out towards the bottom down here. So this design does have that kind of blocky aesthetic to it because of the clay roller. So that is what we are going to be looking for. You could use something that has a bit of a taper on the end of it so you would get a nice thin point, but I really like this brush for this design today. Now at this point, you can then go to the layer and you can tap on it and alpha lock it. So once you've filled it in from side to side, you can alpha lock it, meaning you can't paint outside of what you've already painted there. So if I now go to my colors and I grab, say, this orange tone. It's just the sixth color on that top row. Watch if I zoom in, if I try to draw here, nothing. If I draw over the top of what I've previously drawn, you can see it, because we're only allowed now to draw on what we've already drawn on before. So now what I can do is I can run this orange through here, kind of following some of the lines, but trying to just blend in some additional tones in here. So you can leave your shadows down here. Don't go highlighting things all the way down here necessarily. You want to sort of brighten up the edge of some of your biggest and most bold lines in here, and just randomly at times just run the orange through. It's creating random hues in there, random variation in color. And if you get something like this, maybe you can just sort of streak it in on the very top edge, just to kind of add in a ton of lighting on them. And then go to your colors again. Grab the yellowy tone just beside it. It's the fifth color on that top row. Run it through some of those areas there. Now this is where you want to be a little bit more sort of specific on where you add the color, because we don't want to add in too much of this, but I want to make sure it's right on the ends of some of our grass here. Really sharpens them up as well. It really brings them into focus, definitely on your main focal points of your main areas there, keeping them nice and bright, bringing them right to the front of your attention. They bring it right towards you and say, this is what I want you to look at. This is the thing that's nice and sharp. And then we can go ahead and go back to the layer now, turn off the alpha lock, and we can go to our color again. Let's just carry on first of all with the fourth color on that top row, because I want to get back into these focal points here. And I just want to kind of introduce all the little sort of seeds, etc., that just flow off the edge of it. So a little something like that all the way up to the top. Doesn't have to be perfect in any way at all. You can just draw them in all the way down if you wish. Along the main focal point, the main stem of it will look great. And then along this one too, all the way out, leaning them all out to the right hand side slightly. You can even draw some just slightly off the back as well if you need to, just like along there. Don't be afraid to put them on areas as well that are not your main focal point. Just try not to sort of make them too dense. You want to try and again tell everybody where to look without having to actually tell them. So you can detail some of these by creating these little dashes and all the little seeds off of the end here of the natural grass in the sand dunes. Along some of those. Lovely. And a couple more on the ends will look great, especially down here. You can flush this out. We do have green tones to introduce in a moment as well, so some of your gaps, if you do have any gaps, that's fine, we can fill them in. Again, let's just then go back to it, tap on it and alpha lock it just for a moment. Go back to your colors, grab the yellow just beside it, the fifth color on that top row, and then zoom in and just dash away on some of those areas there. Again, I'm dashing because I don't want to purposely add it in exactly where I want it, if that makes sense. We're allowing the randomness of my strokes here, and what it does land on is in the highlight, and what it doesn't land on is simply in the shadows. That's fine. Lovely. Let's then go ahead and go back to the layer, tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. We're going to move into the green tones at the very front here. So we're going to go to the green, third color on that top row. I might make the brush size ever so slightly smaller if I can, maybe down to 6.8 there. And similar kind of process. You could even put this on a separate layer if you're concerned. So let's do that. Let's create a second layer, and then let's go ahead and just run grass through here. I'm going to vary the size. I'm going to go from a 6 to about a 10, just so I can create varying weights in here. And again, we're just streaking in this very similar fashion, except now we've got kind of beautiful grassy green tones. And you can really streak some in there. Have fun with it. Build up this whole environment down here. In a minute, we're going to go ahead and move this layer here in front. In fact, let's do it now. Grab this shadow here that you created in the bottom left and drag it up and in front of all of those layers. Now what it does is it guarantees that the bottom corner here is going to be nice and dark. I'm back on the green layer, and then that way we can guarantee it's going to be nice and dark, so we don't need to worry about that. We'll have this natural kind of vignette on the end of the design. You can throw a couple of green ones a little bit further up. You're looking for anything that you didn't particularly like before. So here, for example, I can add in a few more down in this area. And they don't have to necessarily flow all that way. You can have a line go the opposite way as well. I wouldn't do too many, mind, because sometimes it gets really distracting. And then go ahead and go to your colors. Grab the color just beside it, which is the top of the second column. And in a similar way, just kind of run this through. These are slightly brighter. I'm not alpha locking the layer. I don't really want to. I want to maybe even introduce some more volume in here by doing it like this. And a couple of your sort of grassy reeds up towards the top, just introduce some light tone on top of them. Now, hopefully what this is also doing is just fading out ever so slightly the line there of that land in behind. So hopefully you're slowly starting to sort of get rid of that and it kind of fades off. If we go to our colors again, we've got another color, top left of the palette, a lovely bright green tone. Again, you can get in there on some of your grassy blades that you can purposely see, introduce some more tone in here. You may even want to just introduce it slightly lower. There's always opportunities here for you to do what you want. If you like the certain look of what you've done so far, you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to add in any more. You can leave it as you wish. Now at this point, you can go ahead and create a new layer. We can set the new layer, tap on it and change its blend mode from normal to the option of color dodge. Then what you can do is, if we set the opacity to around about, say 50%, let's start with 50. If you set the brush size to around about sort of 8, keeping it nice and small, we're going to purposely zoom in now and we're going to try and accent some of these green lines. So we're drawing on top of some of the lines. Because it's set to color dodge, look at the difference in these two. This one's more green and saturated and this one's got a bit more of a yellow look to it. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going along some of the edges of the grass. I'm looking specifically for green at this point and just highlighting a few of those that I feel just want to stand out that little bit more. Don't have to add in a boatload, you can leave this bottom right area. Then go to your colors and grab this. Let's go for the yellow tone, top of the 5th column. And the same sort of principle, you're now looking for some areas. So I'm going to go along some of my reedy areas here where all the little seeds are in here. Going over the top, just trying to brighten up a few of those in there. A couple of the reeds running through. Oh, lovely. They'll end up really nice and yellow. You'll get some lovely orange tones in there too. Keep it to a minimal, don't do too much. Along some of those. You can do a few down here. You can even make the brush size really small if you want, like a 4. Just to go along some of them and not fill in the whole thing. You can even run this yellow up and down some grass if you want. It will just give you a slightly different sort of hue and color to it. So you can go along some of these. Lovely. And then the final thing you can do is actually go ahead and add a frame if you want. So you can go right to the top of your layers and create a new layer. Go to your colors. We want to grab a nice light blue tone. So let's start off, say, for example, with the color in the bottom left of the palette. Now, earlier on when we created our grid, you've got this magnet still. If you tap on the magnet, now what's happening is when you draw, you're only able to draw with the grid. So what that allows us to do is if we set the brush size, let's say to, that looks okay. I think around about sort of 50 to 30. If you now start down here in the bottom left, you can just draw straight up and down. You can go along the edge here of your frame. You can go down here, up and down, because all you're able to do is draw in a horizontal fashion or vertical, and you've added in a lovely little frame. You can turn off your grid, you can go ahead and pinch your 2 fingers and go full screen with 4, and you end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this postcard style design in this simple painting style. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them. And if you'd like to get early access to these tutorials, as well as have a loyalty badge beside your name that grows over time, well, you can become a member of the channel. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. You'll be supporting me and the work that I do here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. And if you like this video here, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.